So we don't really have like a hard and fast agenda for today, but one thing I do want to talk about, and that's one of the reasons why some of our Bywater friends are here today, is one of the things I think is the most difficult part of Koha when you're a consortium is the resource sharing part. And the more libraries you add, the more complex it gets. So what we found is our big issue has to do with holds reciprocity. Now, if you're a consortium and everybody has the exact same circ rules and they lend all the exact same things, then this probably isn't a problem for you. If you are like us, and it sounds like a couple other you have different types of libraries. For example, like if you have any school libraries, even if you have the same circ rules, those schools do close at some point during the year, and you don't want hold requests going into those schools that aren't going to be filled because they are vacant during the summer. So that's part of reciprocity. In our consortium, we also have some libraries that don't want to lend DVDs. So for whatever reason, that's in one case, it's because when they lend DVDs, their patrons borrow DVDs, and that ups their courier costs to a point where they don't want to pay for it. So it's so successful that they don't like it. So it's just kind of an interesting quirk. But we have to respect those rules that they want to enforce. And what the issue we face is that there are two ways that you can set up basic hold rules. And one is you can either look at the circ rules of the item, or you can look at the circ rules of the patron. Either way you go, that creates a scenario in which something is not being honored. What I have proposed and to Bywater is we looking at both of those things. That way, if somebody says, if you're a school and you say, I'm closed for the year, then you just set things not lending, and then it will prevent requests from coming in, and it will prevent requests from going out. Right now, you kind of have a choose your own adventure on that. And there's some other ways that we use with like branch transfer limits and things like that I use to manage that, but it is complicated. And with the new upgrade, and we'll talk more about the upgrade later and see how that's going for everyone if you're on it yet, or talk about what to expect. A few things have changed that have just made it a little bit worse. So because of the way item level holds work now, you used to get a nice little message that said can't be transferred to pickup item. Now you get valid pickup locations that you select from. Just makes it confusing. I already noticed from running some reports yesterday that there's been some confusion and people requesting, staff are requesting items that aren't actually available to be picked up at their library, but the holds are going through because they're selecting a library across the state that their patron will never be able to go to pick up those items. So that's kind of sets the stage for my thinking of that. But the idea of having this conversation is to not just have what works for our consortium drive any changes we make with holds rules, but get feedback, because there's probably some other things that your libraries have that maybe we don't need, but that are related to this type of thing. So I just wanted to kind of set the floor for that, and then try to get some discussion going on what your ideal hold resource sharing system would be, and if there's some pain points you've experienced.
Bob, this is Jerry Brock. I have to admit we've run into somewhat the same challenge, and it's not unusual for us to have 50 or 60 miles between libraries. So patrons in one library will occasionally choose the pickup location, and you're right, it will be another library. We recently addressed that. My contractor that works with me seemed to have found a solution, but I need to get the details from her, or at least somewhat of a solution. But I'll try and get that and email that to you, and you can see if there's anything there that you can use. Or
yeah, that'd be great. I can share that with the group. I mean, we do have some workarounds. It's just I think my goal is to get somewhere where it's more in because I know Jason and I have discussed this before. There, he uses a lot of jQuery and things like that.
Mhm.
But ultimately, getting something where it's actually coded into Koha
Yeah,
might work a little bit more efficiently. But it's always good to hear what other people are doing with their workarounds. Maybe
right.
that, at least in the short term, that could help some libraries out.
Mhm.
There are a lot of the issues that you're describing that we specifically build into the policies that, the nobody is theoretically allowed to prevent things. If it circulates at your library, it should be available to any other library is kind of the way we look at it. We don't have a situation where courier costs go up if for things, if you're borrowing more, your courier costs don't go up because Nichols highly subsidizes the courier here in Kansas. There's a flat fee, but that's kind of what we try to do is when people join, they know that they're going to be in a situation where they have to loan. If the item circulates at their library, if their patrons can put a hold on it, anybody can put a hold on it. So, and I wouldn't really call that a workaround so much as like a policy decision. I think it's probably a little different in Colorado where you've got a statewide consortium. Our consortium geographically is not nearly that big. It's not even a quarter of the size of Kansas. So
Yeah, this is more of a situation where you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And I don't think we would have grown when I start. Like I said, we have 129 libraries, and we have over, if you count we're migrating a bunch of Department of Corrections libraries. We have like another 25 plus coming in the next year. So when I started, we had 32 libraries, I think, but we wouldn't have been able to grow and provide the service mostly to rural communities if we didn't sell them on the fact that that they could keep local control on most things. So there was just at this point, there's no way to tell people you have to lend your DVDs and like it. But like I said, even if you have all the same circles, if you're dealing with schools, shutting those down is a complex process currently for us. So, anybody else have experience? I know a couple of you are kind of new to this. I don't know if you've run into uh, the teeth of how resource sharing is working or not working.
Well, we had some issues with item level holds acting weird between locations. But with the four of us, we just kind of agreed to only do bib level holds from the OPAC side, and that really fixed a lot of our problems. But if I was going to drive to all four libraries, it's only 60 miles, which I do that every other week. So I mean, there's not a courier cost aside from just my gas and labor to make a delivery between all of our locations. But getting rid of item level holds really was a nice benefit for us to make it easier.
Yeah, that's certainly something we try to do, but staff obviously have the ability to do that. When we have patron place holds, we force them to be bib level. And so that's why we don't have a massive problem, because I think if when they placed holds, they had the same kind of view as we do on the staff side, we would have a bit of a disaster. So fortunately, it's not a major problem, but staff are getting confused multiple times a day
there is when I heard about the issue with the upgrade from Lizette at Valnet, where now in the new version in 2105, there is a separate drop down on each item level, on each item in the staff interface when you place a hold. So I wrote some jQuery and to work around that, and I posted the link there for that. So that I think will stop most confusion on the staff side, but it's going to be a problem if the location that the item is at is a forbidden location for hold pickup. So
Yeah, and that's why we haven't used yours, George. Bywater wrote some jQuery for us that makes it so the list is blank to start with. And then, so if you click on it, it forces you to click on it and look and then see if there's your library. So hopefully staff will be paying attention to that. Where we're facing the issue is just because there's less messaging on there, because it used to be, if there wasn't, it used to be great, to place a bib level hold, if the pickup location didn't match, there used to be a message saying no holds are available or something like that, and then that button would be grayed out. So we are still seeing bib level holds more than item level holds being rung, just because that change has changed some of the messaging. Jason, I know I mentioned you had some jQuery. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you're handling this?
Sure. So all of our sort of hold restrictions at the local level are handled by the holds policies and the CERC rules. We also are mostly bib level. Our patrons can't place item level holds, and our staff are strongly discouraged from doing so. Really, the only situation we allow it is if they're trying to get their own item back for some reason. As far as the holds policies handle, for us, it's the new items really. We're trying to enforce reciprocal sharing among our libraries for new items, and we've got it set up so that some libraries can delay sharing of their new items, and most libraries just share their new items. And that's handled by creating a holds policy on the item type. But there are some things that I had to jQuery out to make that work. I've added tooltips on the OPAC, so patrons at those libraries where things are delayed realize that they can't place holds yet because their library doesn't share. It's slightly passive aggressive in messaging. And then the holds queue at some point started pulling in those holds, even though we don't want to send them. So I had to kind of jQuery out the libraries that don't share their items off of the libraries that do share their items. But yeah, we've never used the transfer limits, and it seems like for the most part, the holds policies in the circles work, but they're very unclear. I mean, work has been done over time to kind of clarify that section of this circ policies, but it's still really confusing trying to get it to do exactly what you want it to do. I do wonder, they recently added holds groups to those settings, so I wonder if that may be a possible solution for the schools. Like if you take them in and out of the group, could you possibly turn them on and off of sharing basically?
We did a little experimentation with that, and it had a lot of like buggy unintended consequences because we do have some districts within multi-branch districts within our large consortium. So we thought maybe that would help. And then all of a sudden it was like saying things like they didn't have a valid pickup location at their own library, like things like that were just kind of unintended. And I just went, I'm just washing my hands of this. We'll go back to what we were doing. But there's definitely some opportunity there for some more testing, I think, and that creates some possibilities. One thing Jason mentioned the branch transfer limits. I was pulling up. I'm going to share my screen real quick just so I can show you how we're managing it. So Bywater apparently this is how it used to look, and then they made the branch transfer limits look a lot differently, but we have so many branches, it doesn't actually load. So Kyle kind of reinstated this for us, and this is what we've been using. But you can see the amount of complexity it goes, and we have some libraries that a lot of the schools that never started resharing after COVID, and in some cases aren't even open. And some of these are like seasonal libraries, but just this giant mass of check marks that we have to manage. So that I have created a system that works, but anytime a library is opening or closing, it does take a significant amount of time and kind of a a well, like a well-practiced procedure to get it so it actually works well. But this is way preferable than before when I used to create really long spreadsheets and submit them to the Bywater data team and they tried to load it that way. So that was way less accurate and way more work. So, that's just an example of kind of how we're approaching it. I definitely want to make plenty of time to talk about other things, but does anybody else have any thoughts or experiences they wanted to share?
We would love to hear what kind of development initiative would be needed to fix these holds issues. You know, it would be great if y'all could get together and put together a spec, or at least a description of what needs to be fixed, you know. Then we can look at this. We've heard from enough people that this item level drop down that was added is not cool. So like, what do we need to fix about it? You know, we didn't write it. It was, you know, that's part of the open source deal. But we can fix it. You know, we've done that a lot. So if there are certain aspects of this feature that are creating excess workflow needs and, you know, frustrations and confusion, just tell us what those pain points are and we'll fix them. You know, we've heard from enough people where we're not going to be pushing for major funding on this. You know, we might try and get a couple dollars here and there. But if this is like, if we can just get kind of specifically what it is that needs to be fixed, you know, then we'll do it. We'll reach out to the original developer, see what they were thinking, and go from there, you know. So yeah, we're fully, you know, invested in making everybody's lives and workflows better. And we don't necessarily need money from anybody to do that, especially if it's an issue with our larger consortiums and, you know, even our smaller libraries that is making more work for you. That's something that we want to eliminate. We want code to make your lives easier, not harder, especially with upgrades, you know. But again, in an open source community, we don't control every piece of functionality that goes in. We try and keep our eyes on every piece of functionality that goes in, but sometimes you don't know until it's actually in production. And then we fix it.
Hey, Bob, Jerry here. How easy would it be to demonstrate this problem, what screens you go through, what drop down, and so forth? That might help in some context for me.
Yeah, I can pull something up real quick. I just want to, I'll just say something in response to Nate, and then I'll work on getting that pulled up so you can see it. Okay. But I know exactly what would fix our problem. So, but the key is that might not be, you know, we want to make sure that a lot of other libraries' needs are considered and that we're not screwing them up just because it fixes something for us. Right. So that's really the key. So for us, I know that the issue that's exacerbated by this recent update is that the item pickup locations are looking at for valid pickup locations. Mm-hmm. And for us, the only valid pickup location is the home location. And the only way I think we can get the Koha to view that is if it's checking both against the item circ rules and the patron circ rules. So is this a patron that can request this from this library? Is this an item that's requestable from an outside patron? That's the kind of thing that I think would then only populate what is actually valid. Right. So that solves our problems. But let me try to show you an example. While
Bob's pulling this up, let me say that, you know, from my perspective, the big problem here is that the day before the upgrade, Koha works one way. When you place an item level hold, the pickup location is, unless you change it, the pickup location is the location that you're placing the hold at. But the day after the upgrade, the item level, the bib level hold is the pickup location where you're logged in at. And the item level, if you change that to item level, it's different than what it was on the day before the upgrade. So there's a change there that happens because of the upgrade in people's workflow, and that's the problem. Is And it's because I think ultimately the issue is that it's because the developers and the libraries don't communicate well with each other about, there's so many things that happen where the developer says, somebody says to a developer, what if we did this? And there isn't enough feedback from other librarians to the developers to say this is going to have, and it's not a problem that's easy to fix, because what it requires is more feedback from librarians in Bugzilla. Ultimately, I think is what the issue is that it requires libraries have enough staff to monitor what's going on in the Koha community, to know, to better communication between the community and the librarians oftentimes that are using the software. That's always been my experience, is that a lot of the problems that we encounter are because the libraries and the developers aren't really communicating well.
Yeah, and I think that's what this process, and sorry, Nate, to step on you. I think that's the whole thing we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, and we try and communicate any major changes prior to the upgrade through our educational webinars that we do. I think we did 2 before this one, but it's after the fact, right? It's already written and it's coming.
Yeah, and my experience too is it's never the big enhancements that are a problem. It's always when somebody says, hey, let's change this dropdown from a simple HTML select dropdown to some Java. I mean, that's one of the issues I think going on here, is that somebody said, instead of using this built up, piece of HTML to create the dropdown for that item level, can you pick it up or not? Some developer said, hey, there's this way to do the dropdown, build it out of jQuery with this select to jQuery plugin. Let's use that instead, because it loads 1/500th of a second faster than the other one, which isn't a bad thing, but it completely changed the way that dropdown is being built. And so that unleashed all of these other unforeseen problems. I think that's part of the issue.
So like an on-off switch wouldn't fix this.
I don't know.
Like default to the system preference, making this a system preference. Better way to approach this?
I don't know, because, like I said, this was something that was, that I wasn't even aware of, because it was a bug that somebody opened and somebody worked on. And I try to spend a lot of time in Bugzilla knowing what's going on. And even I didn't catch this one. And that's, I think, part of the issue. Every now and then I will catch something where somebody will say, hey, let's do this in a development. And I'll catch it and I'll say, but that's going to have this unintended consequence. And that's always what we're fighting with, is, when we have these things pop up, it's always the unintended consequence of a good idea, because Koha is used by so many different people in so many different ways that, somebody comes up with an idea. And that's, I think, what Bob is trying to avoid, is by saying, let's do this way. But he doesn't want to create an unintended consequence from that. So,
as far as there just being a switch, if you could go with the API, which is what's being currently used, or go back to the way it was, that would at least restore kind of some of the functionality we had and make our lives a little easier. It doesn't serve our big problem, but it would be helpful. So just to give that feedback, I'm going to share my screen again, because I want to show you kind of what it looks like when we're placing a hold. So one of the things we've done with jQuery is this pop-up message, just to let libraries know, hey, the what's showing is the available pickup doesn't match. So you need to actually think about this before you place the hold. And now we are actually getting. So this is actually different today. This is what it used to look like. So I'm not sure why that has changed, but this is actually good, because it is showing the patron from a different library and cannot place holds. This is something I was not being able to see before. So
is this the stuff that you wanted Lucas to pop in?
Well, we already had this existing, but
okay.
The this behavior has slightly changed. Let me try another one. That is a positive development because that was not what it was looking like previously. So that's exciting.
Sweet.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, something, let me see. I'll see if I can find another example, but that is actually the functionality we were used to having that was not existing as of yesterday when I was doing testing. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the heck happened with that.
Well, let me see if I can pop over to my test server and see if it's been fixed on my test server yet, so we can show people what the issue.
But yeah, hopefully, I mean, that would at least get us back to normal there. Doing one more quick test, and then if anybody has any other thoughts, please go ahead, and then we can move on to another issue. I don't mean to monopolize the whole meeting this way. Interesting. Okay.
I mean, it's still educational for me because I'm learning about how other libraries use the consortium and how, you know, in consortium concepts. So I'm just kind of trying to absorb as much as I can.
And I would just add on this specific issue, I still don't know what that bug is or why it was added, and I'm just like confused about it. So if like that column wasn't there before and now it is, and I know that at the webinar on the upgrade we talked about it a little bit, and it was supposed to just be bringing something to the front so we could see how things work better. I think that's how I understood it. But it'd be really nice to actually know what the intention was of the developer, even if we don't have control over why turning it on and off. It would be nice to know the why of it.
Okay, I figured out what was going on. I was using a patron from a library that didn't request that has DVD lending turned off. So that's why we were getting that message I wanted to see. But this is so that's kind of the example of how it works one way, but not both ways, where that was actually doing exactly what I wanted because the library rules say that they don't lend DVDs. But our Canyon City branch doesn't borrow DVDs, but they are, if I look at the valid pickup locations, I could select them, even though they do not lend DVDs. I can also place a hold, and this one will only list Canyon City as an option. So I could do that. Whereas on this one, because the Alamosa actually does lend DVDs, I have a whole host of pickup locations. And if I take that away, anyway, if I clear this out, this is how this is what our jQuery is doing, where it's emptying these allowed pickup locations out. And if I place the hold, it's telling me to pick up locations. So ideally, what our staff will do is realize, oh, this is only available at Canyon City. My library is not Canyon City, so I can't place the hold. But you can see how that message isn't here that's warning me off from placing a hold here. So that is that's actually a pretty good example of kind of the issue we're facing. And
I've got it pulled up on my test server with no fix applied. If anybody wants to see what it looks like straight out of the box without any. So let me share my screen after you're done, and
I got one more thing I want to do real quick because I just want to look at what it looks like when we just have a library that doesn't have a requestable item. So this is what is happening when this item is not requestable unless I select the wrong pickup location. But you can see where the pickup is now defaulting to Canyon City because that is the only branch available. So this is where we're running into issues. So if I'm a patron from, in this case, it's Fort Morgan, and they go in the library and request this, and the person isn't paying attention, they'll request that, but it will never come to their library. So that's what I wanted to show. Go for it, George.
So you guys should see my screen with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone up there, right? All right, some nods. So when this is on our test server, straight out of the box, no, nothing here to enhance, what's going on. So we go in and we put in a card number, we pull up the account, and it's going to say pick up in Northeast Kansas Library System, which is, what people expect. It's the library you're at. But if we click on any of these buttons and change this to a item level hold, the allowed pickup locations are going to default to the library that owns the item. And that's where, we have an issue, is that this means that staff who have for years been just going in and the only way to choose the pickup location is up here. Now, when they select an item level hold, the default location isn't going to match the library that they're logged in at. It's going to be the home library, and if they want to choose something from the drop-down, they have to open this drop-down, and it takes a few extra seconds to load, and then they've got to go through and find, presumably, they're going to want the pickup location that they're at. And now they have to go through this extra step of finding the pickup location. So that's, I think, what is I know that was the situation in Valnet. I know that's going to be a situation here. For us, the pickup location, I can use the jQuery I wrote because I know that the pickup location that you're at is going to be a valid location for virtually every item in our system, because we share virtually every item in our system. So that's going to be a solution for me that's not going to work the same for Bob, or it might not work for the same for your library, because you've got different rules about what's shared and what's not shared. And I'm sure what happened is somebody said, I've looked up the bug, and I know that the situation was where somebody said, if you can't place a hold on it, if the hold is never going to be filled, you shouldn't be able to place a hold on it. So how do we do that? And they came up with this idea of, let's put the drop down on the right hand side, and let's build it dynamically with this new jQuery select plugin, and then it'll only populate that list with the list of valid pickup locations for that item. And then the unintended consequence is that for the staff that work at a library every day, all of a sudden now there's this disconnect between what they were doing yesterday, the day before the upgrade, which is just, click on the specific item and it's going to, use the same default, it's going to use the same pickup location that matches that pickup location at the top. But now all of a sudden there's this extra step, and so that's where my libraries are going to face problems without, me fixing it beforehand. And that's exactly the problem that I know that they had at Valnet and at other libraries.
So you just basically forced that secondary drop down to default to whatever's on top of the screen.
Yeah, that's what the jQuery I wrote does, is it just forces that drop down. But then, like Bob said, that's not going to work for him, because there's this other condition in his system where there are a lot of libraries that don't loan things, and that's not the same situation we have, because our libraries loan virtually everything.
It's a tough nut.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that if I had, if somebody else, if there had been more of us keeping an eye on Bugzilla, if somebody was able to oversee everything and understand everything that's going on, we might have had a chance to say this is going to cause this kind of problem. But that's, the situation that we're all in is, I probably spend a couple hours a week in Bugzilla, and that's not enough time to know that everything that's going on.
How do
And
other systems handle this kind of complexity and flexibility with different consortiums running different rules and all that stuff? Does anybody have any input on that? Like, is it better, worse, the same?
well, I've worked at two different consortiums, and there's a lot of difference between my old job and this job, and working where I did in Idaho at Valnet, I was able to see.
I mean, ILSs.
ILSs. How do different ILSs
Yeah,
handle
yeah.
this kind of stuff?
Sorry, when I say systems, I mean ILS.
Yeah. Well, there I've probably got a lot of experience too, because when I worked at Boise Public, we were in a Dynex consortium, and then when I worked at Valnet, we were first in before that I worked at the University of Idaho when we were in a Carl system with 6 other libraries, and then Dynex, and then Voyager, and then Koha, and Carl didn't do anything well. And Dynex, I'm talking about Dynex before Cersei Dynex, where it was all on VT220 terminals. And Voyager doesn't do anything well. So on the one hand, I would say that Koha, even despite all of its problems, there's a lot of things that Koha does better than any of those other systems.
Yeah, I'm just like curious. I mean, if there's a better way that they're doing it, we can copy it. We'll copy it. I mean, like, so I'm interested in poking. I'll do a little research, with recently migrated consortiums who came from like a Polaris system or a Cersei system to see if it is better and how it worked. And maybe it's a simple solution that we just don't see. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not the technical brains in this company, I'm just like the guy who gets things done. So like, I'm gonna, dig and start talking to people and find out like what are other ways that we can approach this to see if we can get more granularity and flexibility in the holds functionality is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah,
It's
I think
not like a standard, it's not a one size fits all.
I think the thing about Koha is it's so flexible, it allows us to get ourselves into trouble on by allowing us to be more complex than we create complex problems. And that's kind of the situation we're in. I going way back to when I worked at a library that had Millennium. I wasn't involved on the system side, but I do remember there being things that you couldn't request, and it worked both ways. So like if there was a restriction on, if there was like a patron category that couldn't request, that worked. If there was I'm drawing back on memory, and a lot of the structure is different, but I remember this working a little bit where it looked both at where the item was, but also who was requesting it. So I do remember that, but again, I wasn't on the system, so I don't know anything about how that worked, and that's not even the current III product. So I assume Sierra works similarly, but no clue there. Well, I think we've still got a little bit over 10 minutes. I think we've explored this issue pretty well for this. I don't want to just have this be the whole meeting. So what I would, we can certainly talk a little bit more about the most recent upgrade, but for those of you that are kind of new to this, I'm curious what questions you have, what we might be able to answer for you.
I don't specifically have any like questions. I guess I harass Bywater an awful lot. They see a lot of tickets from me frequently, and so it's usually whenever something comes up as far as like a question with the rest of the consortium members, it's like one of us is usually making a ticket within like 30 minutes of the question coming up. So at the moment I don't have anything. I'm just trying to learn more about how other libraries do the consortium and what works for you, and something that we may be able to implement. We're tiny, we're 4 libraries, so a lot of the big arcing issues that y'all are dealing with, they're kind of not applicable. But I never know what y'all are talking about, and may take away and be like, I can do that. So, but I appreciate just
Sure.
being here.
Bob, I'm going to throw out a Hail Mary because I don't even know if this is even a good idea. But the transport cost matrix, could that be used for anything?
My answer was, given my knowledge of it, which is not extensive, I think that gets us basically into what we're using branch transfer limits for, where it's a super complex way to work around an underlying issue. So probably is the answer, but I don't know that it gets us any further towards simplicity.
I used the branch transfer, the cost transportation matrix at Valnet, and setting it up was a lot of work, which I used jQuery to set it up. The problem is the more complex, the more branches you have, since there's one row for each branch and one column for each branch, the more branches you have, the bigger of a monster it becomes. And so I use jQuery to identify, to be able to click on a row and say, fill in this row with one set of numbers or another set of numbers. But it works, and it has some good advantages to it. But it's the issue with this kind of using it in this way is that it's dealing with everything as if it's dealing with all item types. It's saying, this is it's not saying this item type is allowed to move to this branch from this branch. It's saying everything that goes from this branch to this branch, assign it a value. And the higher the value, the lower down it appears in the hold fill targets process. So it's a good way to stop or to slow things moving from one branch to another branch, but it can't work at a granular item type by item type level. So that would be the big problem there.
That might be something that could help us when we're shutting down like a school for the summer or something like that. But I still think there's probably better ways to do that. I just want to make sure if we're tossing around the word jQuery a lot. Does anybody have any questions about? I don't know how much you've gotten into that on your own sites. Does everybody know what we're meaning when we're talking about how that applies to Koha?
I understand the concept. I couldn't do it myself.
Well, there was a day where it looked completely foreign to me, and then George and I sat down and I actually figured out how to write some myself. Not that I could easily do it again, but it's doable, even though it's kind of a confusing thing. But it's definitely helpful. Jason, I was thinking this might be a good time to promote our November 30th Q&A Giving Tuesday session, because there is an opportunity not just to ask questions here when we meet next, but we do have a Q&A session that we're doing on Tuesday, November 30th. So I was hoping maybe you have that link handy. You can ask us questions, and several of us here will be responding to those in a 2-hour webinar.
Yeah, so the form is still live if you want to shoot a question into it. I'll put that in the chat. And yeah, this will be November 30th, 9 o'clock Pacific, 10 Mountain, 11 Central, noon Eastern. And it'll be streaming live on our YouTube channel if you want to participate.
Go ahead, George.
The link that I put in the chat right above Jason's link, the YouTube link, is to a presentation I did at the koha-US conference called Very, Very Basic jQuery, if you had any jQuery questions. I'm also, speaking of things on the koha-US website, there is a mailing list just for members of, just for other consortia. So if you're not a member of that, just email George at knuckles.org and I can make sure that you're added to that and have the address if you want to send emails just to other libraries that are consortia. That's the quick. I can't find the easy set of instructions for how to subscribe to that, but if you just email george@knuckles.org, I'll make sure you get added. Although please say that you want to get added to the list. Don't just send me a blank email, please.
So the other thing I wanted to make sure we discussed before we left was how often to have these meetings. So this is our first official non-conference meeting in a long time, because before it was a lot of Jason and I just like, catching up because we were the only people here, but this is actually fairly well attended. We're having a good discussion. So we were talking about perhaps doing this quarterly, but we can do it every other month if there seems like there's a lot of interest in having these discussions more regularly than just a few times a year. So I'll open that up to whoever, if you're finding value in this, if you want it more frequently than just 4 times.
Bob, Jerry here, and I do find a good deal of value in it. I'm disappointed I hadn't attended before now, but you're suggesting every other month?
Every other month. And hey, if there's more demand than that, then we could go to monthly. But I think I think let's try every other month, and then if there's more demand, then we can always increase.
I would agree. I think that's a good starting point.
I'd agree with every other month as well.
I agree.
Excellent. Okay, well we'll do that. I know there's a few people that couldn't make it today, and I certainly did not do the earliest job promoting this, and so that will be rectified for next time. So hopefully because I know there's a few faces that kind of have come and gone from these meetings that hopefully we'll see in the future. So we can probably get even a bigger group. I guess I would say we have a couple of minutes left. Was there any other things from this upgrade anybody's noticed that consortia should be aware of?
Has anybody looked at the enhanced reporting for transfers? Like, I know that was something that I had read was coming to it, but I haven't delved into it because we just went live last weekend and I haven't pulled any reports yet.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that, so I haven't messed with that yet.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing anything about that either, but I'm poking around on my test server right now. And
yeah, supposedly it was a little bit better tracking for items, so you could see how long they were in transit versus just when an item went into transit.
I guess what I'm seeing here that I don't think is on my production system is, in addition to transfers to receive, I'm seeing transfers to
yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that report.
Transfers to send as well as transfers to receive.
Yeah, so because we've had some confusion already with transfers and stuff, not people forgetting to check things in when they come in on a transfer, and yeah.
I know one thing that some of our libraries have reported, and this is one of those little things that George is talking about, is that when you're searching a patron to check something out to them, if you just immediately hit the button and you don't wait for their name to kind of populate, it'll actually take you to the details screen versus the checkout screen, because I think it functions like a search versus before it would always go to the checkout screen. And we have a few libraries that are not used to that workflow and have some concerns on that, but you still can do it. It's just so I'll share my screen real quick and do a quick. So if I do, so if I'm checking out and I do Turkish and I let it come up like this, it goes to the checkout screen. If I do that and I just hit enter, it does it as a search and takes me to the details screen. So apparently that functionality is a little different, just something to be aware of.
That's weird.
Yeah.
What if you typed it under checkout?
That I did on both times.
Oh, you didn't just do under search.
Nope.
So if you type the Turkish under checkout, it doesn't take you to the checkout screen.
If
that's a
you
bug.
just hit enter right away.
Yeah, that's a bug.
I don't think it's a bug. I think it's an enhancement, and I think I have a bug number somewhere.
How is that an enhancement? I mean, if you search and then you do that, I get it. You go to the details because you're searching for the patron. But if you're in checkout, that means you want to check something out, and you should go to the checkout.
Right. Yeah.
I think the issue. All right, it's not working that way for me in my test server, so maybe it's not the enhancement I'm thinking of. There is an issue with if you do a patron search, there's this a long-standing issue, or if you do a checkout search, excuse me. If you do a checkout search and you only put in like one letter, it's going to give you, it doesn't do a data table, it just gives you like if you type in Smith, it's going to give you one table with every Smith in it. If you do checkout, if you do patron search, it breaks it up into a data table and it only gives them to you 20 at a time. So there was an enhancement in the works that if you did a search that returned, if you did a checkout search and it returned more than doing a search for a patron name in checkout wasn't going to take you to a checkout search anymore. It was going to take you to the patron search. And the patron search, when you're in patron search and you click on a name, it takes you to the details page. I think that's what's going on here.
I'll put in a ticket, Nate, just so you have that. Because it
seems weird for me.
Well, yeah, it definitely has caught a few of our libraries off guard.
And I think the solution to that is that eventually there's I'm not going to be able to find the bug number now, but it's one that I'm tracking. So, but I'm tracking too many of them to remember what it is. But yeah, I think that for Nate, I would say ask Nick about it because I think he's the one doing the work on that bug.
I know that he's done a lot of performance enhancements to pages.
Yeah.
We had a very large system go live and it was not good. So he needed to fix that. Y'all might not see that big of a change, but for very large systems, it's so much faster now. Actually, even not large systems, people have been saying patron searches are way faster and it loads a lot quicker because of the enhancements that we've added. I don't know.
I don't know if it's caused by this bug, but this is the bug I'm thinking of. It's 15812. But I don't know if it's been pushed back into this version or not. So it could be a different bug. So.
Well, we are in bonus time here, so if people want to hang out and chat a little bit, that's good. But if you have places to go, certainly understand that. I will be putting out. We'll figure out. We'll probably aim for a third because I think this is in a couple months. This is probably going to be about when the calendar is still clear. So I can take another look at that and I'll confer with Jason. But in a couple of months, middle of the month. So middle of January, we'll aim for another Thursday morning meeting. But yeah, hang out if you want to chat for a little bit. I got a few more minutes. Otherwise, I really appreciate your participation and your attention.
So, and Thursdays work really well for me. Thursdays is a good day.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank y'all. See y'all next time.